Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Ask the Expert session for what's new in analytics and governance. So we have, can we get to the next slide, please? We have a bunch of experts here from the Synapse and Purview teams, and please ask questions in the chat. We'll see the questions, and then we'll get the right expert to answer. And please be aware the session may be recorded, and please don't spam or post inappropriate comments. We have a Microsoft Code of Conduct, which you'll see on the next slide. Please try to adhere to it out of respect for the entire audience. Okay, and now here are our experts. I'm your host, Saveen Reddy. We have Martin Lee from the Azure Synapse Analytics, who will cover Spark, Josh Kaplan, Gaurav Malhotra, and Miguel. And I'll speak out the questions and hand it off to them as needed. So let's begin. And while we're waiting for our first question, I'll start with one of the first ones we have. Just 1 second. Just came in, which is, we made an announcement today, Martin, about Spark 3.0, and there's the first question of like, what version of Spark 3.0 is supported in Synapse? Okay, sure. So as far as our Spark 3 preview, the current version is actually running on a 3.0.2 version as of today. We're going to make a series of updates to Spark 3 from now until GA, and our final version that we GA with will probably be somewhere around the 3.1.2 based on what is released at that time. GA from the open source Spark community. If it's gonna border right around the 3.1.2 and 3.2 timeframe, so we'll see which way we go for GA. Okay, great. And I know we always get this question. We see this as well. Another question around people are expecting performance improvements from Spark 3.0. Can you shed any light about how things might be faster? Sure. So one of the main things that we've actually done is for our existing 2.4 platform, we made a lot of enhancements in the engine there. So we actually have a lot of performance improvements in 2.4 from the open source 2.4. In 3.0, what we did was a lot of those enhancements are actually built into 3.0. So you'll still get all of those improvements, but in addition to that, you'll also get AQE. And so the adaptive query engine is something that's, I think, highly asked for a lot of customers. It does the partition tuning. It does some enhancements to the plan itself so that it can actually run a logical plan to the physical plan and then goes back after it gets updated statistics on the data so that it could actually optimize the plan further during the execution. So you should still get some additional performance gains there. I believe from our benchmarks, we are still about 2x faster than open source. Great, great. And we have a question for Josh about Dataverse. And so the question here is, what's different about this kind of integration than the existing export to data lake feature?
So this is actually additional add-on, or actually extends the existing export to data lake feature. That feature has actually been renamed Synapse Link for Dataverse. And the previous feature made it really easy to drop the data into an ADLS storage account, which this one continues to do. But then once you got into the lake, it was kind of tough to figure out what to do with it next. So we've kind of taken care of those next steps for you. So not only does it continue to drop it in the lake, but it actually creates all the metadata and all the tables around it. So when you come into Synapse, you actually see what looks like a database there. And you can query it as if it was a normal SQL database. And you can also use it directly in Spark as well, too, just by using the tables.
Oh, so the integration is really deep into our experience.
Yeah, it's completely end-to-end. We've removed all the manual setup steps you've had to do before you can actually start running your first query.
Great, so simpler and more integrated. Fantastic. Okay, so we have a question about Azure Purview, and Gaurav, I'll direct this one to you. Does Purview support scanning on-premises sources?
Yes, Purview does support scanning on-prem sources. So we do support today Oracle, Teradata, on-prem SQL Server, Apache Hive Metastore, that's in Purview, and we are adding a bunch more in the upcoming iterations as well. So the mechanism to scan those is similar to how you would do data movement using Synapse, using the self-hosted integration runtime. So it's the same self-hosted IR that has been extended now to do metadata scanning and classification for Azure Purview as well. And we are on a very aggressive journey to our, double, triple our sources. We already have industry-leading partnerships, so you'll see us adding more and more on-prem sources in the upcoming iterations as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gaurav. Oh, we have a Power BI question on streaming data flows. So, Miguel, I think you're taking this one. What data sources will be supported for streaming data?
Oh, yeah. As you could see in the demo before, we are supporting in the beginning Event Hub and IoT Hub, which are basically the same with the connection strings that you can include there. Down the road, we are thinking about supporting blob storage, kind of similar to the engine that we use, which is streaming analytics. And of course, with customers' feedback down the road, we might add more, depending on how much we want to extend APIs and other capabilities of streaming data flows themselves.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Miguel. Josh, we have a question for you about Dataverse. It looks like it's getting a lot of excitement there. So I'll read out the question. Dataverse is in the backend on Azure SQL database. With the connection between Dataverse and Synapse, will there be a connection coming between Azure SQL DB and Synapse? Because this customer is not using Cosmos DB.
Gotcha. So Dataverse actually under the covers is a lot of things, and you don't necessarily have to know about that because it's all kind of taken care of for you, and it's presented as if it was one big, basically one big data lake. When you go and use it in Synapse, you can use it with Synapse SQL Serverless, and you have access to that full T-SQL language. So even though the data is actually in a lake, it still feels like it's a normal SQL database to you, and you can use it. You can use it with any of the SQL clients that we support. Additionally, just like we kind of hide the back end of what's going on in the covers in Dataverse, like I said, you can use it like a normal SQL database, but you can also use it like a normal Spark database. And that's one of the nice things about Synapse is it's multi-purpose. You can use it with all these different compute engines. As far as directly integrating this with Azure SQL DB, there is no, at the moment, there's no plan to actually go and dump this directly into Azure SQL DB tables. It's purely going into the lake, and then you have the SQL serverless that you can use on top of it, and Spark as well.
Got it. It'll always land in the lake, and then we'll do the analysis on that data.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. We have another question, Martin. Of course, so much curiosity around Spark and the major announcements that happened in build. This one's about GPU support. So which GPU SKUs will you support?
So what we're doing in our private preview is we're going to be using the T4 GPU chip SKU. So that's what we'll be going out with today. We are doing some additional work in some other GPU chips that we don't have in private preview yet, but currently it would be the T4s.
Okay, great. Let's see. Let's find the next question. Yeah, this is a Power BI question, Miguel, and this is, of course, again about the data flows. And now, of course, people are asking for specific dates on availability.
Oh, yes, because in the session we said just announcing later this year. We had a blog post yesterday announcing that by early July, this will be available, maybe a little bit sooner. So we're pretty much kind of closing on the details, and people will be able to play with it publicly by then.
Great. Josh, another one for you, which is again about Synapse Link. And the question here is about, I guess, the relationship between Synapse Link for Dataverse and Dynamics 365 Customer Insights.
Yeah, so Dynamics 365 Customer Insights data is certainly available through this. There's actually, if you go into the Dynamics 365 Customer Insights portal, there's actually a dedicated experience for setting this up directly in there. So you'll actually see under the connections in Customer Insights, you'll see a way to connect it to Synapse, and then you can also set up the export and everything right from there without having to go over to Power Apps. And that same data, that same experience will be available when you open up your Synapse workspace.
Great. We have one question for Gaurav on Azure Purview. And so the question here is around the integration with Synapse. What are some of the use cases for using a Purview-powered search inside a Synapse workspace? I think it's a great question.
Yeah, so today, as you know, like with data scientists, data analysts, they have a bunch of Synapse workspaces in their organization. So when they go and try to search for anything, like let's say they're searching for a SQL database or for a particular table or even for a file in the data lake, it's what is local to that workspace they're able to find. But now imagine if all of those 1,000, let's just say 1,000 Synapse workspaces in an organization are hooked up to a single Purview account, and Purview is kind of scanning all your entire hybrid data estate to maintain that, to form that, single view of what data exists in your data estate. And if all those 1,000 Synapse workspaces are hooked up to that single Purview account, then the data analyst, data scientists can search across Synapse workspaces, and also they're able to search the entire hybrid data estate, because Purview is scanning your Oracle instance, your Teradata instance, your ERP instances with SAP. So they are now able to discover data sets that they don't even knew that they existed in their organization. And then we are working to enhance productivity for developers, where once they are able to search, once they search that particular, let's just say an ERP table in their SAP S/4HANA, then we can automatically discover that, oh, this particular asset is actually not present in the local Synapse workspace. So we are enabling productivity gestures to say, oh, you can connect to it and you can bring it in scope of your Synapse workspaces. So that's a huge improvement for data scientists, data analysts to start analyzing their workloads inside their Synapse workspaces.
Okay, great. So Josh, another one for you about Power BI and sorry, Miguel, my apologies. Are there any new
people call me Mike too, so don't worry.
Are there any new key features planned for Power BI release deployment pipelines?
Yes, there are. Even though I'm not the PM on that feature, we are planning on adding support for the artifacts that you cannot do today there. And also, I think we actually did a blog post announcement either the week before build or this week. So let me look for the link and I'll paste it on the questions so people can access that and see more in detail.
Thank you so much. Okay, and now Martin, I know you were expecting this question. So of course the question we have now is about Spark and Synapse versus Databricks. And the questions I think is a very natural one, which is like, what are the different use cases for one versus the other? And are they mutually exclusive? And would you think a customer would use them at the same time? But let's start with maybe just the use cases. How do you want people to think about that?
Yeah, this question comes up a lot. I think there's some confusion there. So the way I'd like to present Spark is more really as, rather than just an individual product, we're looking at it as a Synapse ecosystem. So the way that you would use Spark in Synapse is the full integrated environment where you have all of your permissions, all of your security, and the integration between all of the different engines, along with our metastore and everything that's shared in a single space. So I think to take advantage of things like that, I think Synapse is a great solution. Existing customers who have Databricks currently can still continue to use Databricks. There are connectors into Synapse for our warehouse that they can use as well. You can use pipelines, you can do all of those things. But to have a truly integrated environment where you can take advantage of even multi-languages such as T-SQL, you can actually use our serverless SQL to be able to query and serve the data that your Spark jobs would create and engineer the data for serving.
Okay, great. Let's see. There's another one here for Josh for Dataverse integration. So the question here is there a way to export Dataverse data directly to Azure Data Warehouse? I think because I think we were talking about the lake part earlier.
Yeah, so the data will go into the lake, and like I mentioned, you can query it directly with Synapse SQL. Now, if you want to match this data up with other business data, build a more traditional data warehouse with this, then absolutely you can use the pipelines and data flows within Synapse to just read directly on top of this data. And you don't have to deal with files and file partitions and which folders they're in and finding the latest snapshots. You just deal with them like they're regular SQL tables at that point.
It just looks like a database of tables.
Yep, it's a database of tables.
Of course. It shouldn't matter to you that it's in the lake. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yep.
Okay. Especially with serverless SQL. Here we have a good question for Spark for Martin. And so I'll read it out as, in Misha's Synapse demo, it looked like she was able to query Delta Lake with the serverless SQL pool, which would be great. Any details on when that capability will be available? I realize you're from Spark, but maybe you could know about the plans for Delta Lake and serverless SQL.
Yeah, so all of the features for Delta Lake, especially I believe the demo is using Spark 3. We do support the Delta Lake 0.8 currently in the Synapse Spark 3 version. But what I think the serverless SQL side is still in private preview for the Delta support. So I think it really just comes down to when that becomes public. I don't have the details on that.
Right. I will add, since I also have talked to the serverless team, initially the serverless SQL support will come off to support read scenarios and not update scenarios. That'll be a longer term thing. So in the meanwhile, when it is more available, you can read Delta Lake with serverless SQL pools. But if you need to, of course, modify the data and somewhere update it, you should continue to use Spark to work with Delta Lake until the update scenarios are covered in serverless SQL.
Right. I think that's the our goal here is that to use Spark to really engineer the data and get the data prep, data cleansing, do all the machine learning and everything else. And we do recommend to serve the data that's in your data lake to use our serverless.
Okay, great. Let's find the next question. Let's see. Hang on one second. I have to just see. There's a question. I'm not really so familiar with how to answer this question. Gaurav, it's to you. It may be more meaningful when I ask it. Will Purview capabilities extend to estate scanning, discovery, even if it's just Azure infrastructure? And I don't fully understand the context, but maybe you could elaborate.
Yeah, so it goes back to the first question that you posted, Savine, which is we are able to scan on-prem, but we are actually not only limiting ourselves to the Azure cloud. So we are able to scan multi-cloud. We are starting our multi-cloud journey with S3. You'll see us lighting sources towards the mid of next month with respect to Google BigQuery, Google Looker. That's something that we're working to add. So essentially, it's all over, like it's multi-cloud, SaaS sources, operational sources. So pretty much everything in Azure that we currently support, our multi-cloud journey with Amazon S3, Google, on-prem sources that you see, and like you'll see us doing many more in the upcoming iterations as well. One thing I do want to point that we have added in the system, and it's based on the customer feedback that we got. So you could do point-wise connections to, let's say, your Amazon S3 account or to your, let's just say, Azure Data Lake account. But what we've also enabled is for well-known hierarchies like Azure, AWS, where you could just come and register your subscription. And then we will do the heavy lifting of automatically discovering all the Synapse analytics, serverless dedicated pools or the SQL databases or the storage accounts that exist in that particular subscription and bringing it under the umbrella of Purview governance. And that is true even for Amazon S3 as well, where you just register your account and we can automatically discover the buckets as well. And we will continue to expand this for well-known hierarchies, including Google as well in future.
Got it. And Gaurav, since I have you on the line, another question came in as we're talking about. Can you clarify the difference between Purview and Azure Information Protection?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about Purview, right, Purview is a data governance service which allows you to maximize the business value of data, right? So what we have enabled today in Purview is for you to lay the foundations of effective data governance by doing this automated scanning and classification across your hybrid data estate, so that you can create a holistic map, which is nothing but a graph of all of those assets. And then we have this Purview catalog application that we have on top, which allows you to browse and search your map, define your business glossary, and then consume information from the map. Now, a part of what we are doing as part of our integration with M365 is that we are fully integrated with Microsoft information protection labels. So if you are an Office customer and you have these Microsoft information protection labels, which is basically if you go to your Outlook email, you could tag it as confidential, right? So earlier it was only limited to the Office ecosystem. But now what we are saying is that you can extend that to Purview workloads so that those Microsoft information protection labels can apply to your SQL columns, to your Cosmos DB collections. So that's the part that we are tying together with the M365 ecosystem on what used to happen in Azure Information Protection world. So that's how you should think about Azure Information Protection, what exists in the M365 ecosystem, what exists with Purview, with both structured as well as unstructured data.
Great, thank you so much, Gaurav. Okay, let's find the next question. We have one for Josh. I think this is a really interesting question, Josh. They're asking, what is your recommendation around bringing external data and doing joins with Dataverse Data? We have a bunch of external data in other clouds and on-premises stores. I want to join with Dataverse Data using Synapse Link for Dataverse. So any patterns or recommendations you have there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple patterns depending on what you're trying to get out of it. If it's the case where you're trying to take data from a bunch of external sources and you actually want to mash it up together with the Dataverse data, and by mash it up I mean actually transform it and apply some business logic to it, and have the data from the different sources actually in the same tables, not just related, then pipelines is a great way, and data flow is a great way to go and actually bring that data into Synapse, but also work on top of that Dataverse data very easily and do the transformation on there so you can combine it with the other data you're bringing in. Now, there's some scenarios where you want the lowest possible latency for your data. So when something changes in let's say Dynamics CRM, you want to build a Power BI report on top of that that's able to pick up those changes almost immediately. And you want to have as few hops in between and few copies of the data in between your report and your the report and your data. Then what we've seen people do is actually just go talk to the data in the lake directly. So don't make any copies of it. Just query it like it's normal SQL tables. When data is updated, it'll change there in the lake, and your reports and your queries will get the latest data. Now, you still want to bring in external data and relate it to it. You can actually create a second database in Synapse, a serverless database that you can put whatever data you want in there that you want to make available. And then you can actually do cross-database queries. Use a three-part name to reference the Dataverse database from the new one you created. And you can actually combine the two together without actually having to do any data movement at that point.
Great. Gaurav, Purview seems to be having a lot of questions. Another one came in. And this is, are there plans for lower cost of entry for Purview? The fixed cost of a Purview instance is pretty high right now, especially for a public preview resource.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the key things that we are doing for the GA release is to enable what we call as the Purview data map elasticity. Now, what it will allow customers to do is that instead of doing a fixed CU model, so today we expose 4 CU and 16 CUs, and you have to be picking one during the provisioning time, you'll actually start with just 1 CU, and we will scale it up and down depending on if you're doing more scanning, if you're making more calls to the system, and that will bring down the entry cost as well substantially. So absolutely, yes, we are working to do that as part of our GA release that we are targeting around late summer. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me find the next question.
Actually, Savine, before you do,
yes.
Well, we actually are past the 5-minute mark, so we only have a few minutes left. However, if we do need to go extra, we can. So.
Oh, we're already at the end of the session.
We got 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, thank you for the warning on that one. Okay, we have a question about Azure Cognitive Services, and this is for Nelly. So the question here is, which cognitive services can I use from the no-code UI experience inside a Synapse workspace? We may be having some audio difficulties. Okay, I'll come back to Nelly since she's having problems getting her voice through this call. Gar, I'm sorry, I keep on asking you questions, but you're right now a superstar in this for these people. Question: will we extend Purview multi-cloud capabilities to Oracle Cloud OCI?
Yep. So our goal is to essentially be able to scan your entire data estate, right? Whether it's Amazon, it's Google, Oracle. It's just we are on that journey to enable those connectivity in our system. So absolutely, yes, we will extend that scanning capability to include Oracle Cloud as well. Okay,
great. And a question for Josh: do you foresee the integration between Dataverse and Purview? I guess it's to both either Gaurav and Josh, from a governance perspective. Maybe I could use the same Azure Synapse link for Dataverse. So are there any thoughts you have around that?
Yeah.
Go first, or?
Yeah, so absolutely, yes. So this is something that we are looking to understand the scenarios, working with customers to understand the scenarios of what it would mean to essentially, capture the metadata, the lineage information with respect to the Dataverse environments. So in short, the answer is yes. That's something that we're looking in the upcoming semesters to light up.
Okay, great. And go ahead, Josh. Sorry, I'm sorry.
In general, we're focusing on trying to remove all these steps and barriers and extra setup. So this is not specific to Purview, but just how you see, we've removed a few steps here with getting Dataverse data into Synapse. We want to make sure the next steps and the next steps after that we can reduce and simplify for you. So these are definitely things we're looking into.
Okay, and I think Nelly is now online, so I'm going to ask her a couple of the cognitive services questions. Nelly, the first question that came up is, with Synapse's integration for cognitive services, which cognitive services can someone use from the no-code UI inside of Synapse Studio?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the ones that we have today in the UI is anomaly detector that you can use on time series data, for example, and text analytics sentiment analysis. But we're actively, encouraging users to give us suggestions of what you would like to see there. You can, from code, actually interact with most of the cognitive services through a library that's called MML Spark, Microsoft Machine Learning for Spark. So the ability is there, but from the UI, we're looking at lighting up more and would love some suggestions.
Okay, great. And how should they send you these suggestions?
Here in the chat would be great. And also the Synapse Studio feedback is a great feature, actually. So if you just go into Synapse Studio and there's I think in the upper right corner, there's a place for feedback that will go directly to our inbox in the product team. So encourage you to provide feedback that way.
Yes, thank you for reminding me about that, Nelly. And just for the audience, we look at that feedback, like the entire team sees it every day and we review it every week. So it doesn't disappear. We pay attention to what that feedback is saying and we track it. Okay, I'm trying to find let's find one more. There's another cognitive question actually, Nelly, which is what are some of the other ways I can enrich my data using machine learning and Synapse?
Yes, so as I mentioned, you can do it through code first experiences, right? You can actually use the Azure ML SDK, and it's included out of the box. You don't even have to really install anything, and you can leverage that directly from the Synapse notebooks. But in addition to that, obviously, you can use Microsoft Machine Learning for Spark and other open source machine learning libraries that you want if you want to write the code yourself to, for example, build models or call cognitive services. And you can also leverage AutoML. We have a wizard UI experience for AutoML, but you can also invoke AutoML using the Azure ML SDK from code. So there are lots of ways for you to enrich, but I would say pre-built AI is probably the easiest one, is probably cognitive services. Yeah.
Okay. And with that, we've reached the end of our session. I want to thank all our experts for talking and answering these really great questions. I want to thank the audience for asking some great questions, and this was a great time we had interacting with you all, and hopefully you got a lot out of this. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.